My story starts off here when I'm a baby, just as anyone's story starts off. But for all intents and purposes, my story probably really starts off here in the fourth grade when I have one of my earliest remembrances of him, Kevin Bowser. But it wasn't just him, Kevin Bowser. It was them, the twins. And the twins were Kevin and Kelvin Bowser. They're 10 years my senior, but I never felt 10 years their junior. They were my father's best friend's sons, and they were everything to me: my coaches, my neighbors, my mentors, my friends. They were the men I wanted to be as a boy. They gave me driving lessons, life lessons, health information, and even took pictures like this one on my senior prom. Kevin commuted back and forth to his job every day at the World Trade Center from Philadelphia for 20 years, and then came. But I had an idea to create a scholarship fund as to have his name and spirit live on in perpetuity at his high school alma mater of Bartram High School in Philadelphia. So to raise funds and awareness for the scholarship, I took my act, my hopes, my ideals, and a picture of Kevin across the United States on a bicycle. So I cashed in a bunch of favors and I jumped on a plane. I flew to Oregon and was going to ride my bicycle clear across the United States to New Hampshire. But before I did that, I had to baptize my bike. And the process of baptizing your bike is when you dip your rear wheel in the Pacific Ocean and cross over to the United States of America as if it's that easy, and dip your front wheel in the Atlantic. I went to the front desk of my hotel and I said, "Which way to the Pacific Ocean?" The guy replied, "Just go over the bridge and you can't miss it." Now, there are two bridges. There's the right bridge and there's the one I took. The bridge I took is the Astoria Bridge, and it's 4.1 miles long and one of the windiest in the country. And it didn't take me to the Pacific Ocean, it took me to Washington State and the Columbia River, which empties out into the Pacific. So I kind of baptized my bike. But anyway, my ride started. I rode my bike through Oregon, Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Canada, New York, Vermont, and New Hampshire. And that's where I officially baptized my bike. And I dipped my front wheel, my back wheel, my bike, and my whole body in the Atlantic Ocean. And then I decided to ride home to Philadelphia, but I was so close to another state that I decided to get another one in. And I rode my bike north a couple miles to Maine, and then to Massachusetts, and then to Connecticut, and to New York, this time to New York City and the site of the World Trade Centers at some of the various memorials that had been established to drop off a picture of Kevin that I've been carrying with me the whole time. The next state I passed through was Jersey, and then finally Pennsylvania, to Philadelphia, and specifically 50th and King Sessing, which is where Kevin's father lived and where Kevin was raised. And waiting for me there was a marching band and the press. I gave my first press conference ever in my whole life, and I even got an award from the mayor and raised enough money to ease the financial burden of a couple college-bound seniors so they could go on to become college graduates, much like the one that you see here that looks a lot like my mother. After all of this, I rode off into the sunset. But wait, there's more. Because of a story that was done on me in the Philadelphia Inquirer, I got anonymous emails from all over the planet congratulating me. Places like Japan and Finland and Spain, all over the United States of America and Mexico. And one of these anonymous emails led me to the Tour de Freak website. And a Tour de Freak is a race that takes you through 10 countries and goes over 7,000 miles. And I thought, geez, on a bike? Well, certainly not in a boat. And then I said, what if? This is pretty intriguing. But then I said, why? I've already done my good deed for my lifetime. But then I said those two words that stir something in each of us. So I jumped in a plane and I flew to Egypt. I saw the pyramids and the Sphinx. I touched a bust of Alexander the Great that was made in 3rd century BC and touched a wall that was made around the same time. The race started right at the pyramids. I set up my first tent ever in my whole life. Do you think these guys could guess that I wasn't a camper? What do you think? I rode my bike through Sudan, Ethiopia. Well, I had some immigration issues first, along with these other riders, and was stopped at the border. Hey, folks, remember to get a visa. But once I was allowed to go into the country, I rode on through to Kenya and Tanzania and Malawi and Zambia and Botswana, Namibia, and finally South Africa. The end. Well, it could have been if I didn't open up my eyes, my head, and my heart. And I thought of Kevin, Kevin the loving husband, Kevin the nurturing father, Kevin the young man, the twin, and I thought of Kelvin, the twin left behind. I thought of Kevin the friend, my mentor, my man. I thought of his father, and my father, and my family. And I thought of families in general. I thought of the Sudanese family that gave me a lot more than the cup of tea that they initially offered. They gave me a lesson in humanity. You see, the structure that you see there is their home. It is made of reeds, corrugated tin, and stuff we would throw away and call garbage. But I didn't feel like I was sitting amid garbage. I felt like I was sitting inside somebody's humble home. And it didn't matter that I had enough money in cash in my pocket to buy their home, their dog, and maybe even put a sizable down payment on them. All that was important to them was that I looked tired and I looked thirsty. Can you imagine someone here in the States extending you the same amount of courtesy and respect? I thought about the Samburu warriors that I saw when I was in Kenya and the tarantulas that I saw. I thought about not bathing for days on end. Myself, along with this other rider, had been in the bush for 9 straight days and were paying the equivalent of 50 cents to bathe in that structure that you see behind us. I remember the beautiful sunrises like this one in Lake Lagano, Ethiopia. And who could forget the bugs? They were all over the place. I thought about the bridges over sand, and I couldn't understand why they were there until someone told me that after the rainy season, all the sand is covered by a flowing river, at which point a bridge is very, very necessary. I thought about the lizards and the Southern Cross that you can only see in the sky unless you're literally on the other side of the planet. I will never forget the huge bugs like this one in Botswana. I thought about the bathrooms that I had to endure, and the snakes, and the bathrooms. I thought of the vicious cycle of nature, and even at its seemingly most cruelest and most grotesque, it really is a necessary and captivating thing. Myself, along with a few other riders, sat and watched these vultures pick at this dead horse carcass for the better part of a half hour. And don't forget the bathrooms, and the lions, and the bathrooms, and the warthog crossings. Or maybe the warthogs. I don't know. I never saw them. And the bathrooms, and the zebras. The bathrooms. I thought about the birds like this one in Ethiopia called a kite. And kites are some of the most agile and aggressive birds in this region, and they were grabbing raw meat out of midair as we were throwing it up to them. The moment was only topped by what happened next. One kite fighting another for the scraps of the meat in midair. It was like a bird version of Top Gun. And of course I thought about the bathrooms. I thought about the donkeys that seem to be everywhere in Africa. Notice anything about this one in particular? I thought about getting lost in the Sudanese desert, and then later on finding my way out of the desert. And then even later still that evening staying at the best and only hotel in Kerma, Sudan. And then the next morning having a breakfast, a half a can of Coca-Cola and some overripe bananas. I thought of these herding camels that I saw wandering in the desert, and these young boys that I saw on their way to school in Kenya, and these beautiful girls that I saw coming back from school also in Kenya. I thought of the various prayer services that I saw all throughout my journeys, and the kids that seemed to surround me everywhere I went. I thought about how relationships were strengthened like this one. He did the whole trip and she did the bottom third of it with him. Their boyfriend and girlfriend, they said it brought them together so much that they're going to do a whole nother cross-continental trip someday. I thought about the kids that I gave Liberty Bell pins to throughout my journey, and the unnamed animals like this one that I saw on a safari in Tanzania. I thought about how relationships were born like this one. He's from Holland and she's from Japan. They met at the beginning of the trip and he's already moved to Japan just to be closer to her. I thought of these kids and how they were so scared of me I literally had to crawl on my stomach to take their picture. And I thought about the really unnamed animals like this one that I saw in Zambia. Does anybody know what this is? I thought about seeing baboons and monkeys so much so that it was like seeing a squirrel or a pigeon in the park. And the beautiful vistas that I saw like this one in Ethiopia. This is literally my first few hours in the country of Ethiopia, and I thought, my God, everywhere I turn, it looks like a postcard. I'm not a professional photographer, but I think I did a pretty good job here. I thought of the poor hospitals like this one that I visited in a small town in Kenya. Even if you take a passing glance, you will see nothing. There's no sheets, no pillowcases, no shoes, no socks, nothing. And at the time that I took this picture, I had more medicines, migraine stuff, bandages, and in my own personal luggage than this whole hospital had. And one of the saddest things I ever saw was I saw the hospital administrator turn away not one, but 2 people because there was nothing they could do for them. I thought about the beautiful smiles that I came across, like this Ethiopian guy who gave me a gift and said, please don't forget me, because I made him laugh so much as I was frantically trying to get my embassy in Ethiopia. I thought about the beautiful sunsets, like this one at the Zambezi River in Victoria Falls. I thought of the sisters in Ethiopia that invited me into their home and made me coffee. I thought of the mother and daughter that shared a table with me in South Africa one night. I thought of the husbands and wives from the United States and Canada that were with me every pedal stroke of the way, and the mother and son in Ethiopia that invited me into their home for dinner, and the Austrian family that invited me into their family in their homeland. I thought of these brothers in Zambia and the brothers and sisters all over. I thought of how these Tanzanian children made me feel like I was on top of the world just for a second, and the leaps of faith that I took, like this one, when I bungee jumped 121 meters off this bridge at Victoria Falls. I thought of the small termite mounds, like this one that I saw, and trust me, this is a small termite mound. The tallest one I saw was 25 to 30 feet high, and I assumed it was a tree until I changed my perspective the next morning and saw that it was, in fact, a termite mound. I thought about the more somber moments of the trip, like this one, when I inadvertently attended a funeral in Bar Dar, Ethiopia. I came out of a store, and the normal and hustle and bustle was replaced by an eerie stillness of a couple of hundred folks walking in complete silence, and all you could hear for blocks was the screaming and sobbing of a mother who lost her 8-year-old son the day before when he tried to get his ball out of the river and could not swim and drowned. We all like to think that Americans are so different from Ethiopians, and gays are different than straights, and this one is weird and that one is bad. But we forget at the basis of everything, we're all just people. That boy that died was a person, and the mother is a person too, and was screaming and crying just like any mother anywhere in the world would if she had to bury her own child. And I thought about this, the handshake that I'll never forget. This little boy was so happy to see me when I crossed the Kenyan border that he just ran up to me and wouldn't let my hand go. And I thought it was one of my best pictures. So, anyway, I jumped in a plane and I flew to 4806 King Sessing Avenue, which, after everything I had seen, seemed like Taj Mahal. So that left me pondering not only life, but the African lifestyle versus the American lifestyle. And I thought about the most precious thing on this earth, and it's not gold, oil, or money. It's drinking water, and what it takes to get in Africa versus how plentiful it is here. I thought about people's homes and how I've never met anyone that lived in a one-room dung and straw hut until I went to Africa. I thought about riding on a bus, not in a bus as most of us have, but on a bus. After buses, trucks, trolleys, or any kind of motorized vehicles filled to capacity, they put as many people as they can on top of it, because if you don't ride that way, you simply ain't getting there. I thought about the image of poverty and how for most Americans it's this, but if you think about it, after school loans, credit card debt, home loans, insurance, cell phone bills, and all that other stuff that we need, this woman is a lot closer to breaking even than we will ever be. Since I've been back in the States, I've never heard about so many things that people need. Someone told me they needed HBO so they could see The Sopranos. Another person told me they needed spinning rims for their car. And yet another told me they needed a big diamond encrusted watch. But this woman, all she wants is some clean water and a roof over her head. I've been to Sioux Falls in South Dakota and Niagara Falls in Canada and the United States. I've been to Victoria Falls in Africa. I sat at a campfire in Kenya and watched a Maasai tribesman take the dying embers of this very flame and run away like he had a prize. And I couldn't figure out why he did this until I was informed that with these embers of this dying fire, he was going to go start a fire for himself, his family, and his community, so they can not only survive, but thrive. We've all heard the saying, one man's trash is another man's treasure, but it's another thing to see it, sense it, contribute to it, and live it. I saw traffic jams that were a mixture of cars and livestock, and whole families that I would see beautifully tooling around the city on one bicycle. In Africa, I found there is no pot of gold at the end of rainbows, but rather the act of chasing them is the gold. I thought about how similar the towns in Africa were to many that I passed in the United States. One main street with a drugstore, hardware store, market, and so on, existing peacefully without competition. But because of AIDS, poor health care, and so on, the only business that was able to sustain a competitor is that of a coffin manufacturer. And I walked into one of these places and I asked what was up with this, and the guy just replied, "People are dying, brother." Here is my friend standing in the middle of the Trans-African Highway. It sure looks a lot different than I-95 or some other interstate, doesn't it? This road is nothing but dried lava rock, and we had to endure this for about 5 days. What'd you have for breakfast this morning? Many Africans would love what you see here. One bland helping of oatmeal. No salt, no sugar, no prize, no commercial of Paris Hilton washing a car trying to induce them to buy more. What does your fast food joint look like? Does it look like this? Or does it look like this? And how come the poorest folks in the United States of America, the richest country in the world, look like this? But the poor people in the richest continent in the world, Africa, look like this. What does your butcher look like? Does it look like this? Or how about your morning commute to work? Does it look like this? Or maybe this? Or even this? When's the last time you saw a creature other than a dog or cat walking down the street? So that brings me to today. And what the heck has this taught me all about life? I really don't know, but I do know this. I've been fat. I've been fit. And I pretty much stay in between. I've been smart. And I damn sure have been dumb. I learned that Bill Clinton was right on when he said that it doesn't matter what they call you in life. It only matters what you answer to. And out of all the store names that I expected to see in Africa, niggas was not one of them. When I went up to these gentlemen and asked them why they would name the store such, all they could tell me was, P. Diddy, New York City, we're the niggas. I laughed at first, but then I was quickly embarrassed because I was responsible for this sign. Nah, I didn't write it, and no, I didn't put it up. But I did buy CDs that referred to me as such, and I did support movies that promoted this image. Yep, it was me all right, but I'm not alone. So people out there, think. If you don't like being called a nigga, a bitch, a hoe, a faggot, or anything like that, think. Think before you speak. Think before you support, and think before you purchase, because purchase is the same as compliance. Words are heavy, brother, and pictures don't lie. I know I've ridden bikes all over the world. I've ridden benches all over the world. I rode elephants in Zambia, camels in Egypt, horses in the United States and Africa. I rode a jackalope in Wyoming, or at least a stuffed jackalope, wooden horses in Idaho, wooden zebras in South Dakota. I got sick a couple times everywhere and had to ride the bus. I've run to the left and to the right. I biked through what I thought was the smallest city in the United States of America, and then I went a couple miles and went to the actual smallest city in the United States of America, Lost Springs, Wyoming, population 4. That is no lie. I've been to the tip of Africa and around the world, and places in between. And somewhere between there and here, I became most definitely a better cyclist. But more importantly, I became a better man. And it's because I did the simplest and most powerful thing in the world. And by changing my mind, I gained a deeper, more profound understanding of men and women and children. I learned that real men can wear masks, but only fraudulent men hide behind them. I learned that men can be minimal in clothing, but real men are always maximal and rich in character. And I learned that real men never hide in the shadows, nor are they defined by fame or monetary wealth. Men are defined by their wealth of their reputation and their ability to inspire and lead. I learned a lot about women, young women, old women, black women, white, and Asian women. I learned to revere and respect women for what they can carry, for what they can carry on their heads, for what they can carry on their backs, and for what they can carry and create within. I learned that a female's true sense of beauty comes from within and not from a thong or a tongue piercing or some tight jeans or something like that. And whether these women work in the boardrooms of our own country or actually live in bush country, whether they're literally giving you their own smile or nurturing a wound with their tender touch, women should be revered and respected and cherished because they're truly amazing creatures. But I guess I learned the most every time I was around a child. I saw a sparkle. I saw a twinkle. I sensed a brilliance. I heard a smile. And a glint. I saw hope, promise, and potential. I detected a certain specialness and sensed a certain amount of playfulness. And I always felt the spirit and could never not help but feel the energy. But never, never in any of the 20 countries that I've been in did I ever see fear or prejudice when I looked inside a child's eye. But I guess I could say a lot of things about children, but the bottom line is this. Treat them all well and protect them, because if you look inside any child's eye, anywhere in the planet, you will see your future, my future, our future. But I guess the greatest thing that I learned is that in order to succeed in anything in life, you must not be afraid. Don't be afraid to make new friends or to be a good friend. Don't be afraid to be right or to be wrong. Don't be afraid to look at something from a different vantage point or to laugh or to cry. Don't be afraid to work or to take a break. Don't be afraid to act like a kid, but at the same time, don't be afraid to grow up. Don't even be afraid of the police or to make up or to walk away. To embrace, to be strong, to create, to go back where you started, to show your better side. Please don't be afraid to help others or to fly or even imagine that you can. Don't be afraid of your ethnicity or to exhibit some pride. Don't be afraid to be balanced, to serve, or to defend. Don't be afraid to wear your hair differently, dress differently, look very differently, eat differently, and never be afraid to be different. Don't be afraid to contemplate, to be alone, to be together, to be the same, to observe. And don't even be afraid of being heavy today, because you know what? You can always work out and be lighter tomorrow. Don't be afraid of switching roles, to be silent, of bucking the system, of loving yourself, and don't even be afraid of loving others. Don't be afraid of your femininity or even your masculinity. Don't be afraid to create, to stand up, to teach others what you do know, or to simply learn what you don't. Don't be afraid to make your own music, or even your own instruments for that matter. Don't be afraid of going this way, or wait a minute, is it that way? Don't be afraid of taking life in a different direction, to show some respect, to do something to earn it. Don't be afraid to grab life by the horns, to travel to foreign lands. And when you travel to these foreign lands, don't be afraid to travel there differently. And when you travel to these foreign lands differently, don't be afraid of the other cultures that you'll encounter. And when you encounter these cultures, don't be afraid of embracing them. Don't be afraid to listen, to be a hero to somebody. Don't be afraid to love in any way, shape, or form, because pretty much all forms of love are simply beautiful. Don't be afraid to change, to see more, to be more. Don't be afraid to view nature as art or of other orientations. Don't be afraid to nurture life. And just to pause for a second, this gentleman had AIDS and joined us in Kenya, and he had to be a lot more cognizant of his hydration and nutritional levels than we did, but it's a testament to what you could do if you put your mind to it. Don't be afraid to juggle more than one thing or how you look naked. Don't be afraid to read or of your own perceived physical limitations and handicaps. This is one of the riders on the trip, and he's missing two things: legs, and he was the third fastest guy overall, and he kicked my ass every day on the bike. Don't be afraid to give back, to lead, to follow, or just get out of the way. Don't be afraid to be free, to hold hands, to mend physically, to mend mentally, or even mend mechanically. Don't be afraid to worship. Don't even be afraid of your past. Don't be afraid to get dirty, to go to sleep, to take on any challenge in life, no matter how seemingly insurmountable. Don't be afraid to think out of the box, or of your own shadow, or what may be in front of you, behind you, or to reach for the skies. Don't be afraid to be the fastest, the slowest, the biggest, not even be the smallest. And don't be afraid to find your own bike. And by your own bike, I mean that thing that you do well, that thing that only makes your heart sing, that thing that really contributes to the world. And when you find your own bike inside of yourself, don't be afraid to ride it. And when you finally do ride it, don't be afraid to ride it across your own Africa. And don't be afraid of getting knocked down. Just be afraid of not getting back up. And be afraid of not living, not just breathing or existing, but rather living up to your own greatest potential. And be afraid of being ignorant. And be afraid of wasting your whole life chasing a buck. And be afraid of being greedy. And be very, very afraid of being lazy. But don't be afraid of creating your own path in life or of riding off into the sunset. And most of all, don't be afraid to fail, because you know what? When you change the perspective, failure looks a lot like success. So don't be afraid of how the world looks on a bike, because you just may see something that you like. So what's next? South America, Asia, and the rest of the continents in a new scholarship fund with the completion of each. I'm David Hale Sylvester, the first African American across 2 continents on a bicycle. I'm not rich, I'm not famous, I'm not even sponsored, and I'm certainly not a filmmaker. I'm just a regular guy with a dead friend, a bicycle, and a passion to contribute to that world by riding my bicycle around it. Oh yeah, there is one more thing you should know about me. I'm not afraid to live life, to love it, or to contribute to it. So whoever you are, wherever you go, whatever you do, today, tomorrow, and every day of your whole entire life, always remember to contribute to something.